All right. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the first session block of the xAPI party. I'm glad to have you here in this session with me. Go ahead and in the chat, say hi, introduce yourself, tell people why you picked this session and what you're hoping to get out of it. So I know we've got still a few people joining, and I'll give folks a chance to get in and join as we go. But in this session, what I really want to talk about is how to get there, how to start where you are now and how to get there, assuming that you have a sense for what xAPI is, right? So as we get going, we can be connecting you to resources. Those of you who are joining us who do have resources and have experience, by all means, go ahead and paste that in the chat for others. So I see a few of you out there. I see Brian Duck, I see Rob Wiggins, and a couple of other folks who have been doing xAPI. So by all means, feel free to share. Renee, I'm glad. All right, this is I hope, right, that this is exactly what you need in order to share and get started. So with that, let's share and get started. So I am going to share my screen here. With any luck, you're seeing a very long hike in front of you. So let's take a look really at, what a roadmap for implementation might look like. And I'm thinking here of a macro roadmap, not a micro roadmap, right? So really like the roadmap that your organization will take to get from this base camp looking like place to some fantastic summit in the future that isn't even, right, the pinnacle, right? Because I actually am not sure, right, that we know, right, what 10 years looks like. So Monique, fantastic, looking at a clear map to advocate for getting and implementing xAPI in your university. Fantastic. Okay, so we're all here for the right reasons. Keep sharing that in the chat, everybody, because this is an opportunity for you to connect with other people who are at the same stage or ahead or behind you and learn from each other. So I'm a big fan of this. I'm going to do a proper introduction here for those of you whom I haven't had the opportunity to work with yet. I'm the CEO and founder at Torrance Learning, and we're a full stack learning strategy, design, development, software, platforms, and data firm. So we really want to do that kind of from the strategy down to every last bit of data that you keep track of to see if you're on track with that strategy. And along the way, we also, right, so we do, and probably the center of gravity of our work is learning, design, and development. And along the way, we do a lot of things around professional development for our industry. So we do agile project management for instructional designers. That's Llama. We do cultivating racial equity in the workplace for instructional designers. That's Crew. We have off-the-shelf products like Eleventure and xAPI, which is an xAPI statement builder, right? So if you don't know how to write the JavaScript to make xAPI statements from your learning programs, you can use xAPI to do that, right? We founded the xAPI cohort because we wanted a place for people to come and learn and have fun with this data specification. And on the side, because I might have some free time after all that, I am a facilitator at eCornell in the Women's Executive Leadership Program and the Psychology of Teams. And so I want to join you and have you join me on this journey, right? How do we get from now to next to later to someplace amazing, right? With a great view. Actually, I think the view from right now is pretty good too, right? But what we want to do is talk about what do we have to do now and next to get later, right? Because the things that we start doing now are going to influence our ability and our path and our enjoyment of the path along the way to get to later. Right. And I will say we probably, like I mentioned a minute ago, we probably don't know exactly where the end will be. Hopefully it's not just going to like fall off some horrible cliff. But really I want to work with the actionable future here maybe the next 1, 3, 5 years. And once we get to the 1, 3, 5 years, once we get to later, we'll be able to see where those future spots are, right? And like I said, right, the goal is to make that pit at the bottom a little bit less miserable. That's pretty much where we're going today, right? And how we experience this journey, right? I feel like there's two things, right? This is our organization's journey, right? Not our individual personal journeys, but we as individual people can influence our organizations, right? There's things that we have influence about, right? Even if we're not the ones who are making the decisions, we can, by our actions, we can be exerting influence over strategy, people, who is on the team, who we ask to be on the team, who we select, whose skill, right? Which skills we develop, that skill set we build in ourselves, and skill sets that we hire for, those skill sets that we partner for. When we buy tools and when we buy products, what are we buying? What questions are we asking? How are we going about and doing that? And then what relationships do we build within the organization itself? Right? What relationships? And I'll tell you a story. I remember about 5, 6, 8 years ago, right? I would talk to clients and if somebody said, oh, we should get IT involved with that, right? What I would get back, check to see if you've done this yourself, right? What I get back is, oh, if we involve IT in that, it will never get done. Do me a favor in the chat, yes or no. Have you ever said or heard or felt that? If we get an IT involved, we will never get done. Right? Monique is fessing up. Yes, yes, right? It was yes, Renee, right? Okay, I hear you. I hear you. I have been there, right? We'll say, right, on this journey, if you don't get IT involved, you may not get there. Right? Michael, right? So, you will need to build relationships across other functions, relationships with your business or right, whatever your customer or client facing space is there, relationships with your vendors, relationships with IT, relationships maybe with legal as we start looking at data privacy and things like that. So these are things that you can influence. Oh, and relationships that you'll make here in the xAPI community. Right? So there's lots and lots of things that you can influence. And we're actually going to talk about today as we look at the things that you will be doing. We'll be looking at these things, the strategy, the people, the skills, the tools, and those relationships, and how those evolve on your journey. Right? There are things that also affect your organization's roadmap that we don't really have a lot of control over. Right? I'm calling that the weather, right? What the industry offers. Now, I will say we do have influence over what the industry offers because I don't know about you, when I go to a conference, I go up and down the aisles of that expo hall and I say, wow, that's a cool tool. Does it do xAPI? Does it send data as xAPI? Does it ingest data as xAPI? And how do I use that? And I'll tell you, 5, 6 years ago, the answer was, sure, lady, we can do all the APIs, which was a pretty clear sign that they did not do xAPI, right? And lately, when I ask that question, the answer is either, yes, let me show you how, or it's on our roadmap. Now, so that's the industry offering, and that's a weather thing, right? It's outside of our direct influence. But as users and consumers of software and platforms and products, right, we do have some influence. So I recommend join me on those walks around the expo. Start asking those questions and be prepared when you ask, does this tool do xAPI? You're probably going to get an answer that says, what would you like to do with it? Because when I ask the vendors, why don't you support xAPI? What they tell me is either their customers don't ask for it or their customers don't know what they want to do with it. So that's why you're here today. right? And then there are economic forces, right? So I did research in 2019 on the state of xAPI adoption and in 2022, but in the middle, there was a pandemic. And so, and there's lots of other things, there's microeconomic and macroeconomic and all sorts of things that we can't control, but they will affect our experience as we go. So let's actually take a quick look into the weather, just a bit. I mentioned that research I did with the Guild. The Guild, gosh, if you all don't know this yet, becoming a member of the Learning Guild is actually free. You just sign up. Right? It's a pretty low bar to entry. Once you get in there, you get access to all of their research reports, and they run a research report about every month. It's pretty amazing stuff. There's also Learning Solutions Magazine, which has just got tons and tons of articles. There's always something new and fresh and very, very current there, as well as some fantastic archives. It's a great place to search for stuff. And honestly, this isn't a commercial for the Learning Guild, but they run 3 great conferences a year. And so there's a lot of things that you can do here. So I want to take a look at adoption, and I mentioned this at the opening session this morning, right? So an innovation, say like a new data specification like xAPI, right, is going to diffuse throughout a population as it gains market share. And right now, I think we're past the innovator stage, maybe at the early side of the early adopter stage, but definitely getting traction in this space. And take a look at this. If you were to draw a curve around this, look at this, kind of squint your eyes, woo, 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 right? It kind of looks like that adoption curve, right? Many of you are in the doing xAPI experiments, or in that nice tall bar of 46% of people who are interested but not yet using xAPI. In fact, I don't know, let's just try something crazy. Hey, if Sierra, I think our annotation tools are turned on. Everybody, if you want to go ahead and go out, bump your mouse up to about where it says that you are viewing Megan Torrance's screen and it says view options. Go ahead and grab your annotation tool and put either a stamper or a scribble or an arrow or a heart with where are you on this industry adoption curve. And I'll even tell you that even at Torrance Learning, whoops, maybe I wasn't able to annotate, darn. Let me try it. Nope, I can't. Okay, well, rather than fight the technology, because we don't have time for fighting technology here today, right? Go ahead and in the chat, right? Where are you on this curve? So I'll tell you, we are at the 5+ projects. It's a lot more than 5. It is dozens and dozens of projects at this point, but it's not all of our work. We still get lots and lots of folks who, I just put that to hosts and panelists. Let me put it out to everybody, right? We still have lots of folks who want SCORM-based e-learning to sit in a SCORM-based LMS, right? Unaware, Sandy, your company is no longer unaware because you are here. Yeah, okay, so this is, right, you're in this interested but not using. Rob is experimenting, right? That's a great, the cohort is a great place to do that experimentation. And here's the thing, from my research with the Guild, what I learned was wherever you are, you're not alone. Right? So these are from the comments that people put in the survey, right? I love this one. This is pretty academic. We use xAPI to track learner behavior in e-learning simulations in order to both gauge their knowledge and to identify potential improvements to the learning experience. We also use this as part of the adaptive learning strategies to route people to additional trainings of value to them. It's like a commercial for xAPI, right? And then Monique, fighting to get people to be aware of xAPI, right? But man, Monique, that's right. Instructional designer plus data scientist, that's like chocolate and peanut butter. That's some pretty cool stuff, right? We also had people tell us most LMSs, right, have limited or no support. A lack of LRS options hinders adoption. Fragmentation in xAPI profiles makes the data hard to use. This person by the vocabulary they're using, right? They know what they want, and the market isn't ready to get them there, right? So there's a certain amount of that. And then I never even knew it existed. Okay, so wherever you are not alone. But most of the people who had not yet implemented, right, that 45% bar are looking at implementing somewhere, right, within the next 3 years, right? Whatever 18 plus 47 is, about 65% of them, 2/3 of them are ready to implement sometime in the next year or 3 years. So there's a lot of traction coming. Okay, so what I would like to know, and let's do this, right? What for you, right? And this is part of your roadmap, right? What is pushing you forward? Go ahead and put that in the chat. What's pushing you forward towards xAPI adoption? The desire for better data. Yes. Yes. And Kelly, you and I have talked about this, right? Every other function in most organizations has better data than the learning people do. Right? We have some catching up to do. Operations expects more data. There we go, Mary, same thing, right? Marcus putting the learner in the center, right? And really being able to give them a better picture of where and when learning is happening. Data, job opportunities. That's where it's at, Maren, right? Spending a lot of time, Anna, yes, right? Spending a lot of time on course development, wondering what you're actually useful, right? What are they actually doing? What actually helps them learn, right? Sandy's in the similar space, right? And trying to fill in that gap around missing data on learner experience and performance, right? This is your why, all of this, right? When we ask people what's pushing them forward to adopt, right? What are some of the forces in the space, right? They were telling us that being able to, right, having xAPI actually promoted to a full-on IEEE standard is important for them, right? They needed that kind of that validation, which, it'll be happening in January, folks, right? As the data profiles and the way we talk about our data becomes more mature and stable, it helps push things forward. One of those profiles is CMI5, which, not to be too confusing, CMI5 is how LMSs should do xAPI, right? It's how you launch e-learning from an LMS in xAPI, right? Have you heard of learning engineering? Right? Just as about 5-8 years ago, learning experience design came into the forefront, learning engineering is coming into the forefront. And really that connection between learning science, data science, and computer science, and what that means for us as designers and developers. Right? Our authoring tools are actually supporting adoption. Right? It is possible to do this without any geekery. Right? And xAPI cohort. I've talked a lot about cohort, so I'm going to stop talking about cohort. Okay, what's holding you back? Oh, Craig, I love it. Solve the measurement and learning effectiveness conundrum once and for all. Yes. And I actually do feel that xAPI provides that basis to do that. Okay, so everybody, what's holding you back? Funds, leadership time, and support. Absolutely. We saw that in our research. What else? What is holding you back? Lack of money, lack of resources. Fa la 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 la. We're over and over again. Support. That's a pretty broad support. Yep. Nothing's going to stop me now, Marcus. I love it. I love it. Right? So interesting. So much consistency. If for nothing else, folks, take a look at this chat stream, right? You are not alone. You are not alone. When we asked in our research what's holding people back, some of it was a lack of knowledge by L&D folks. Okay? Lack of budget and attention, which is what you were all talking about. When you don't have budget and attention, you can't get the tools, and sometimes the tools aren't available the way you need them to be out in the marketplace, right? Lack of tools, lack of platforms, lack of structure, right? And then here's the one that just makes me cringe. An overlapping data model between SCORM and xAPI, right? Where sometimes your leaders, sometimes those very same leaders who one day will say, hey, I really need you to have some better data, or can you show me that this works? And on the other hand, right, you ask them, what kind of data would you like to get out of this learning experience? And they'd say, we'd like to know whether or not they completed it. How did they score on those quizzes? How did they answer the questions? Well, that is possible in SCORM, right? That's absolutely necessary, but already available, right? And what we want to do is get to some interesting stuff, right? So let's talk about what that journey might look like, right? So now that we've looked at the weather and what's going on out there, let's plot a course. This is some work. I want to give credit where credit is due. This is some work I've done with Matt Cleaver. And we've been really looking at what are we seeing out in the marketplace? What are we seeing with our clients as people move through various phases of implementation? And for those of you who are familiar with ADL's 5-step model on their ecosystem evolution, this only gets you up to step 3. Right, so there's more beyond this, right? But really, I will tell you, we're not seeing a lot of organizations yet who are in this full far on right-hand side, full implementation space, if we're taking full implementation in a very rigid perspective. So let's take a look at what it looks like to move from prototype through pilot, production, your first one. And when I say, for me, the difference between pilot and production is actual learners, actual data that you may not actually, right? You're doing it, right? Multiple projects, and then full implementation. And we're going to look at, along the way, strategy and purpose. What are we trying to accomplish at this step? What are the skill sets and the people on the team? What tools do we need? What are we doing with the data, right? And what relationships do we need to build, right? So when we're starting with prototypes, right? Prototypes are what we're building in cohort. Prototypes are those, hey, I got a statement to send from a web page to my learning record store. Or, hey, I built an e-learning course and I was able to get data out of the e-learning course and into a test learning record store, right? And so really just getting in and figuring this out. Cohort is a great place to do this. Some people are doing this after hours, kind of around the edges of their work. They may not need, right? They may not even be getting permission because they're not spending any money. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. Skunkworks is kind of the old-fashioned time, right, phrase for innovation that happens kind of off in the shadows. And it's not, it doesn't have to follow rules. We don't impose a lot of structure around it because we want that innovation to happen and to flourish, right? What am I doing here? We're just getting our feet wet and looking for buy-in for the next stage. Right? Where if this spot like Mary is, right? Where few people in the organization even know what xAPI is. Right? A lot of times we might be using existing tools and existing capabilities. Very few people are going out and learning to program just to send xAPI data in the prototype stage. They might be. They absolutely might be. But a lot of them are doing things that they already know how to do. Right? I've been in this space, right? In the prototype phase, most people, right? They're not looking at statistics. They're not looking at data science. They're not looking at analytics. They are literally just exuberantly excited that it's alive and they actually got a piece of data into that learning record store. And I've been there. I've been there multiple times where it's like, yes, that's exciting, right? And celebrate that. That's huge. So these may be solo projects, quiet projects. You actually probably don't need to involve your IT team at this point, or your legal team, unless you're doing something really sketchy, right? So that's that prototype phase. When we look at pilots, right, we're actually talking about, when I think about a pilot, I'm actually running it with real learners. Maybe not all of them, but real learners. And I'm doing this to get buy-in, right? My strategy here is to get buy-in to the next stage. I'm starting to build capability beyond myself, right? I may still be using free or low-cost LRSs, doing some very, very basic analysis. So an LRS is a learning record store. It's the official database of xAPI, and you need it to catch your xAPI data so you can do something with it, right? And here I say data collection might be an afterthought. It's still off in the pilot stage. It's, can we get data from this place? And what does it look like? I'm not necessarily doing a lot of deep analytics on it. I also don't really have generally statistically significant populations to make meaningful analytics anyways, right? And I might be doing this solo. I might bring in IT, I might bring in a vendor partner or something, depending on your capabilities and how big you are going here, right? And where do most people in their pilots, in their prototypes start? According to our research for the Learning Guild, most of them are starting with e-learning, video, and stuff they're getting out of their LMS. You know why? You already have all of these tools and don't have to pay for them, right? This is free. It's easy. You don't have to ask permission to use them. You don't have to ruffle anybody's feathers, right? You can just do it. Everything else is a little bit harder. So absolutely start with what you've already got, right? Your authoring tools probably already do something with xAPI. Some of them do great xAPI data. Some of them give you SCORM-like data just written as xAPI. Some of them allow you to extend them and get all sorts of cool stuff. And for some of them, you'll want xAPI or some other JavaScript utility to help you build those statements. Okay. So your authoring tools do this. There's actually a ton of other tools that do this, right? So there's lots and lots of opportunity out there to be using learning tools or tools next to and near learning, right? To start getting some of those data in that pilot and prototype stage. And then we look at that first production project. And when I think of first production project, right, I'm actually looking at something with real learners, real data, that I'm probably not going to throw out. I might throw out this data when I'm done, but I'm actually doing it, right? And by time I get to doing it, right, I actually need tools. I am starting to pay for a learning record store here because I've got real people's real data, right? And so it would behoove you to start working with your IT team. You may start bringing in some of the other formal data teams in your organization if they exist, right? You're starting to think about organizing your data, identifying what kinds of needs and standards you have and following those, because you're realizing here that it's not just you anymore. Right? It's not just you anymore, and you need to set and follow some rules so it's going to work. And when I say set and follow some rules around data and data governance, think about it this way, right? If you're building a SCORM course today, you can build a course, publish it, right? And your authoring package even makes your zip file for you. You email that to an LMS administrator you maybe have never, ever even met, and you can just drop it off and go off to the next thing. And it works. They load it up into the LMS, they send it out to all sorts of people, and people who don't even know, I know, Christian, but, right, but who don't, people can run reports on that course who don't even know anything about the course, right? Because they know all the data it will ever spit out because it's spitting out SCORM, right? With xAPI, someday it would be great to be able to say, I'm doing exactly that. right? I just zip it, load it, forget it, right? And move on. And it only works if we follow rules about what kinds of data we're and how we're sending the data that comes out of it, right? Otherwise, it's just garbly gush and nobody can make any sense of it, right? So your first production may be an evolution of that pilot, right? Maybe a different project than that pilot, but it does, right? This is where you're starting to think about, I really need to have some cleaner data, right? I'm then starting to look at, right, where am I putting this data, right? And these learning experiences, and where can we get them? Whoops, sorry, I clicked here, right? So there's a few LMSs that have full xAPI LRS support out of the box. They tend to be the mid-market LMSs, right? Because they moved fast when they saw something come that might give them an edge, right? Many of your larger LMSs don't yet offer full xAPI support the way you really wanted it, right? They will launch an xAPI course, an e-learning course, and then record when it's completed. None of the interesting data in between, nothing that happens outside of the LMS, right? And they have a hard time giving you that data back in a reportable fashion, right? Where the systems here can do that, right? The systems here are much more mature from an xAPI perspective. These guys will get there. Keep calling them, keep bugging them, right? Not all LMS support is the same. I'm working on it too as we go. And then what a lot of people are doing, and this makes a lot of sense because the learning record store is purpose built for xAPI. It's not a learning management system, but it is absolutely designed to use your xAPI data. And so a lot of them are getting a learning record store, which is where they're doing all their fun, cool data stuff. And so this is the approach. Having a learning record store that sits alongside the LMS is what most of my clients are doing. I know a few of you are from Johns Hopkins and a few of you other sources. I know what your LMS is, and so you know that you have a more fully functional LRS inside, right? So as we start looking at what does it look like, right? When I'm on the roadmap part of multiple projects, I consider this the adulting phase, right? I am, depending on how long you've been in that multiple production projects environment, right? You are starting to realize that you have to educate your team and the business. You can't just roll it out. I honestly thought like, oh, hey, we just got xAPI, we're just all going to use it. Right? And like, no. The instructional designers need to know how to use it and why to use it and what to use it for. Right? You've got different teams who are sharing best practices. Right? And you're really thinking about the structure of your data so that each of your multiple production projects can actually talk to each other and not just be a whole big pile of data gibberish, right? You are building processes to support your rollout around data governance. You're building in processes for keeping track of data and doing analytics with every single program that you're doing. You're also encouraging your other learning experience products to use xAPI, right? There's a guy a few years ago at a large oil and gas company, and he was like, well, great, right? Why on earth would I have all of my LMS data in one bucket and my video learning data in another bucket and my surveys in a third bucket? That's not how we learn. We don't learn by tool, right? We learn leadership. Some of it's in the LMS, some of it's video, some of it's survey, some of it's out in the field. I learn safety. Yeah, there's the compliance part in the LMS, but that's not the only other places in which I'm interacting with safety related content. Sales, same thing, right? So this guy, right, Amir Bar, is a member of the cohort. He's presented at the xAPI party in the past. He called up his tools vendors. He called up Kaltura and said, hey, how come how come I can't get my data into the rest of the same pools, the rest of my learning data? And the folks at Kaltura said, that's a good question. Let's fix that. Right? He did the same thing. He called up the survey gizmo. Now they're called Alchemer, right? I want your data in the pool with all the rest of my learning data. Okay? And he was able to build a business case why, and the rest of us get to benefit that because Kaltura and Survey Gizmo or Alchemer both have xAPI feeds now. Okay? So the line between, am I doing multiple projects or am I doing 100% of everything, right? And maybe a full scale operation isn't 100% of everything, right? But when we're at full scale, right, over on that other mountain and getting close to the top, right, our organization assumes we have data. And we do have data, right? And that we can provide insights about what works within our course and what in our courses makes sense outside of, right? Like what are we doing in our courses that actually makes things work, right? Our team is built to use data, right? And I see two things happening in this space. One, I see instructional designers, learning experience designers starting to get much more savvy around using data, right? And they're not becoming statisticians, but they're getting an appreciation for things like statistical significance and hypothesis testing and all sorts of other stuff. And some organizations are already bringing in data scientists on the team, right? And whether they are developing skills, buying skills, right? Borrowing them from the other functions within the organization, right? There's all sorts of ways to get that data science on the team, right? And so they're taking these different approaches, right? They're also only buying tools that integrate with their system. Right? They're only buying tools that integrate with their system. So, right, think about it. If you're a Lego person, right, it's great to buy other Legos because all your Legos work together. If you're a Lego person, right, the other building sets don't interlock with it and they're clunky at the edges. You can kind of cobble them together, but they're clunky and they require extra human support at the edges. Right? So in a full-scale operation, you're really looking for tools that already plug and play with your systems. Right? And the relationships in the way that we go about designing for learning and designing for data, really it becomes a cross-functional exercise, and it is much more business-centric than where some teams are right now. So and this is a space that I think will be really, really interesting in the next, I think 3 to 5 years. We'll see more and more organizations out here in this full scale, right? And you get to a point where it's not, ooh, can we have xAPI with that? To why wouldn't I just have xAPI, right? It just becomes your default and your normal. So what I would love to do is have a conversation with you and in the chat, right? Any questions you might have at this point, but also what kinds of things do you feel like you need on your journey, right? On your organization's roadmap to get from now to next to later with xAPI. Let's open that up. And this is just fantastic chat too, everybody. It's good to have a good interactive group. Sierra, were there any questions that came in on the chat or in Q&A, or any questions you have while people are still typing their questions?
So far, so good.
All right. Mary's got a question. Need more information on what to do with the data. Yes, there is a lot of data. And Mary, I think that's a great point, right? I like to go to the business. We in L&D, we have some ideas, but I also like to go to business and say, what do you wish you knew about our learning experiences? And that tends to generate a number of questions that then points me in the direction of what can I do with this data, right? Renee needs to understand what we need at the company. It's so vast. Yes. Okay. So Renee, don't try to boil the ocean all at once, right? I would say find your most friendly business sponsor and start with that person and find out what they need and what they're interested in. Ideally, that person might also be an opinion leader within the organization. And so they might be willing to let you tell their story throughout the organization of what you were able to accomplish with all your fancy data. And that can help kind of build that momentum for you. Sarah, good to see you, Sarah. Love the details, what LMSs struggle with and these capabilities, more information and the right questions to ask. You know what? There is a Learning Solutions article. Maybe somebody can find it. I should have had that up. Art Workentine and I wrote an article for Learning Solutions in maybe 2019 about things to ask your vendors about when you are shopping for xAPI platforms and tools. And we asked, it's like, what's the initial question? And then what's the question under the question? Like, what are you really getting at with this question? So that's an article that would be a good one to dig up. Michael. Okay. So need to do connecting with others doing similar work in our sector within government. Michael, you may be able to reach out to the folks at ADL. So the advanced or distributed learning. I don't know. It didn't come to my head. And they can help you find other people within the government. You mentioned government, not military. There's a fair amount of work going on with the military too. xAPI comes actually out of the Defense Department, but is supporting other departments government-wide. So thank you for the, thanks teammate, mysterious teammate, for the article with Art Workentine and evaluating team. So thanks, Jamie. Awesome. Hey, everybody, thank you so much. I'm going to toss my email in the chat if there is a question that you have afterwards and you just want to like ask it, go ahead and send me an email. It's probably the best way to get me. And I want to thank you for joining me for this session. This has been a fantastic conversation. And Sarah's going to paste in the links for the next session that starts in 15 minutes. You have an option, right? The metrics that the C-suite uses to decide on L&D resources. So for all of you who said that you weren't adopting xAPI because you didn't have budget or attention, that's one. And then I know a few of you were interested in building that leaderboard in RISE. And so that's over in the other room. So, all right, everybody, thanks so much. Welcome to the xAPI party. Glad you were able to come to my session, and I will catch you later.